This documentary shows images of extreme weather and devastation that may be troubling to some viewers. It also features testimonials from persons who played a significant role in Hurricane Ivan who are no longer with us. This is the retelling of Hurricane Ivan through the eyes of some of our leaders and community that survived it and rebuilt the country from the ground up.
The last report we received shows that Ivan has returned to a Category 5 hurricane strength and is heading towards the Cayman Islands and western Cuba. As of 2 p.m., the well-defined eye of the hurricane was located near latitude 18.2 north and longitude 79.3 west. On this track, Ivan should be moving near or over the Cayman Islands on Sunday. Maximum sustained winds have increased to near 165 miles per hour with higher gusts. This makes Ivan an extremely dangerous Category 5 hurricane.
From the second floor of the hospital, we watched the sea come rolling down Smith Road.
This is not a storm to play with.
Gilbert was nothing like Ivan.
And where we were, we couldn't see outside, so all you're hearing is the roar.
Number of lessons learned. One, the devastating effect of a Category 4 hurricane. I was not prepared for that. I didn't understand the type of devastation that a hurricane could bring. So that was a very valuable lesson to be prepared. When you hear hazard management talk about having a hurricane kit, take that seriously. You don't know whether food is going to be available. You don't know whether banks are going to be available. How are you going to get water? How are you going to get travel around? Is there gas in your car? So those are things that I learned very early on in the storm.
Yeah, I can recall clearly the onset of Ivan. We watched it go through the Eastern Caribbean, and it was supposed to go on a more northerly track and go through even east of Jamaica. And no one thought in Grand Cayman that we would be so severely impacted. And on the Friday morning, I think it was still projected to go east of us, but it hit Jamaica and took a westerly turn. So by Friday evening, we realized that the storm was going to impact us in some way. And certainly by Saturday night, we were experiencing hurricane force winds. And the rest is history, as they say.
This is not a storm to play with. So I immediately tried to get a flight back to Cayman. I got a flight back to Tampa. And although at the time I had been a director of Cayman Airways, I was told that there was no seats on the flight. So I had to get a flight to Fort Lauderdale. Landed Fort Lauderdale, flights were closed down because I had a Hurricane Flora coming off of Bahamas. And so I ended up being in Fort Lauderdale with my sister, anxious to try to get back to Cayman because I just had this feeling Ivan was headed to the Cayman Islands.
As an organization, the Water Authority, we thought we were prepared. We followed our plan. We put a lot of everything in place. But what we didn't really plan for was storm surge. That is a lesson learned. And we have made our plans tighter, stronger, and of course we never know exactly what we will face. But that is one particular lesson that we learned hard and have done our best to be prepared for the next round.
I think we tend to look at the computer screens and the television reports, and we see this line that's drawn, the projected track of the hurricane, and we somehow believe that it's going to magically follow that. The forecasters are getting better at forecasting the track, but we can't. These hurricanes can be very unpredictable. So we always have to, particularly for a major hurricane, we always have to take the necessary precaution, assume that the worst is going to happen, and pray for the best.
When the hurricane came, the first thing
we had been kind of encouraged to do as professionals, because we had to be at the hospital, was if you have frozen food or anything that may go bad or anything, you prepare your food and you take it with you to the shelter. And at the hospital, we shared that food. And one of the memories that stands out in my mind, a couple of days later, when we realized that all the food supplies were severely challenged, the entire meal, I found in the trash. To me, it was a moment of reflection on how much we in Cayman, up until that point, had taken for granted.
When Ivan came, I was the manager of engineering for Cayman Islands, Cayman. And we had never gone through an event like that before. We had Gilbert in the late 80s. Ivan was nothing like Gilbert, or Gilbert was nothing like Ivan. The main lesson learned was we had an excellent hurricane preparation plan. We did not have a very good recovery plan. So the main lesson we learned through that whole exercise was that we need to plan how we're going to recover from one of these things as much as we need to plan how we prepare.
I think probably above and beyond everything was safety, is to make sure that you have a plan as to where you will shelter during a storm. I made the decision to shelter at my home, which was a good decision, but where I live, there's not a lot of flooding, and my home was fairly new at the time. But I still lost a piece of my roof. So you have to know exactly, have that preparedness plan in place in the event of an approaching hurricane.
The last known storm to have brought tremendous devastation to the Cayman Islands took place in 1932, leaving hundreds dead between Cayman Brac and Grand Cayman. Other notable storms such as Hurricane Gilbert, Andrew, and Mitch passed through with some damage, but none as significant as Hurricane Ivan. When Category 5 Hurricane Ivan battered the Cayman Islands for almost 36 hours between September 11th and 12th, 2004, it was truly nothing that many living within our shores had experienced before.
Around the height of the storm that morning, we heard this real knocking on one of the doors by my office. When I looked out, there were 12 people who said they had escaped from their place that they were renting across the road, and they were desperate. They needed somewhere to be. We took them in, and of course that brought in a whole influx of water, and it took several of us to close that door.
We were getting a call from this one particular gentleman, and for whatever reason, every time the phone rings, I would answer. And in the middle of the storm, it started out with him being, okay, the water is up to my ankle. And we would instruct him, okay, go up on a chair. And he would call back and said, okay, the water is up to the chair. What do I do? And we say, okay, go up onto the counter. And he'd call back, and the water is up to the counter. And he's panicking and he's screaming. And he was able to pull the refrigerator out, and he climbed on top of the refrigerator. And he called back again, and he was like, this is it. If you don't hear from me anymore, I'm going up in the ceiling. If you don't hear from me anymore, this is it. And those are just some of the many calls that we had to deal with during the storm.
Well, during the hurricane, the current building on Eastern Avenue, 1 Technology Square, was still under construction, but it was enclosed and sealed. We invited all the staff that needed somewhere to go to come there, and quite a few of them did. What we didn't expect was that the whole community would come. And in the heat of the night, when Ivan was at its fiercest, we had people coming from all over central Georgetown to seek refuge in that building. So we let them in, obviously. The thing that sticks out during that period was that there was a family that was trapped in down behind Rogelio's. And one of the people in the building actually went out in the storm with some ropes and whatever the tools they could get, and brought that family, it was a mother and some children, back to One Technology Square where they were safe. And that's the biggest thing that I recall from that night.
So we manned up about 24 hours before, and then 12 hours before the storm, might have been a little bit more, the governor declared a state of emergency, as you recall. I think it was around 6 o'clock the Saturday evening. You know, that period that the hurricane was over us, I don't know how to explain it other than to say it was frightening. The water came up, the building just shaking and the roof buckling and almost coming off. So it was packed with people and their family, with the kids, and everybody had to come upstairs. You can imagine that's what we faced here in the station, right? And it went on and on and on.
The North Sound is like a cup, okay? And if you've got a storm approaching us on a rather slow path, as it were, it has a tendency to pile up water in the North Sound. So what ended up happening and what we observed at the fire department was 2 storm surges. One come from the North Sound, which is a mild one. So most of the early part of the night and stuff like that, the water settled in, and we didn't have a flooding of the fire bay or the fire department or anything like that. But the cars out in the parking lot were up to about their hubcaps in seawater. But there was a dramatic change when the genuine storm surge came. The genuine storm surge did not come from the North Sound. It actually came from the southeast, from the south coast where the hurricane was passing. We could see the storm surge coming in, right? And I go around and I went to my family and I go like, guys, I think it's time we get upstairs, and stuff like that. And my son looked at me and says, Dad, I think you're a little bit too late. And by the time I got to them on the ground floor, which is just a room or 2 down, and stuff like that, the storm surge had actually started to come into the fire department. We could actually see waves flowing down the runway.
The fear felt during the storm was matched by overwhelming concern once the all clear was finally given on September 12th. Caymanians stepped out of their sheltering places to find their country was completely changed from what it was when they first took refuge mere hours before. Whatever the Cayman Islands looked like on the 10th of September, it was a completely different place in less than 2 days after Hurricane Ivan.
Ivan really taught us a lesson. So in everything that we do, we always look back and say, what could we have done better?
We had to build resiliency within our own organizations to make sure that we had multiple layers and that we were able to fill gaps quickly and as they occurred, and we couldn't just sort of take a very linear approach. Having a strong building stock allows us as a country to be able to rebound quickly from a natural disaster.
The regiment is a new entity. It's only been there a couple of years, but it's already really making its presence felt.
Creating the organization like the regiment means that we have an extra pool of trained and equipped individuals who can support the community emergency services and other organizations.
As we all take that job very seriously, the minute there's a storm coming, we get the call that we're activated. We show up in our uniform ready to serve our country.
We have many of the agencies working with us now. We have the regiment. Overall, we're in a much better place to handle any national disaster that comes our way.
We have come a long, long way, and I'm very satisfied with the progress that we've made.
The Hazard Management Department was born in 2007, 3 years after the Hurricane Ivan. 20 years later, 20 years stronger is like what we like to say, more resilient.
you.